I never imagined sharing this, but life has a way of pulling you into the unexpected. My name is Sophia, and I am 48 years old. I have been a single mother for as long as I can remember, raising my son Mateo on my own. He is 25 now, and we have always been very close, just the two of us navigating the ups and downs of life together. One night, something happened that I still don't know how to explain. Mateo had been working hard and studying late, and he looked exhausted. He said he didn't feel well. I told him he could lie down in my bed for a while to rest. It was one of those cold nights when the house felt colder than usual, so I tucked him in with a thick blanket. At first, it felt normal, just a mother making sure her son was comfortable. But as I sat next to him, Mateo moved closer, curling up under the blanket, as if searching for warmth. He wrapped his arms around me, pulling me gently, in a way that reminded me of when he was younger. At first, I didn't think much of it. I thought he just needed some comfort, so I let it be. His warmth against me, his steady breathing, it all felt strangely reassuring. As he relaxed, I could feel his breathing slow down, as if he were drifting to sleep. The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in the stillness. I stayed there motionless, not wanting to disturb him, telling myself this was simply a mother giving her son the comfort he needed. But then, after a while, Mateo shifted again, moving even closer under the blanket. His arm tightened around me, and I froze for a moment, not knowing how to react. A part of me wanted to pull away, say something lighthearted to break the tension, but another part of me stayed still. There was something in the air, an unspoken tension I couldn't name, and I felt trapped in the moment, not knowing what to think or feel. Then, unexpectedly, I felt something hard beneath the blanket. My heart began to race. I tried to stay calm, convincing myself it was nothing, that he didn't even notice. But as the minutes passed, my thoughts stirred in ways I hadn't anticipated. The heat between us seemed to grow, and I found myself caught in a strange mix of emotions, confusion, discomfort, and a nervous energy that made it hard to breathe. Mateo stayed close, his breathing steady, but the silence in the room felt heavy, pressing down on me. I wanted to move, to create some distance, but the words to excuse myself wouldn't come. Then he shifted slightly, lifting his head to look at me. His eyes carried an expression I couldn't decipher, soft, curious, but firm. It made me feel comforted and strangely uneasy. He didn't say anything, but his gaze seemed to ask if everything was all right. I forced a small smile, hoping it would dissolve the strange tension, but it only made the silence feel stronger. His hand rested lightly on my arm, his fingers brushing against my skin absent-mindedly. It was something so small, so subtle, yet it felt electric. Each soft movement sent sparks through my body that I couldn't ignore. I tried to keep my breathing steady, hoping he wouldn't notice how fast my heart was beating. I didn't know what to do or how to respond. I stayed there in the quiet intensity of the moment, feeling completely entangled in the connection between us. It wasn't something I could explain. It was simply there, unspoken and impossible to ignore. I told myself this was just a mother comforting her son, nothing more. But in the stillness, with only the two of us under the blanket, my thoughts spiraled in ways I couldn't control. He was my son, but there, so close, I felt something deeper, a connection I didn't understand. Completely, a mix of confusion and warmth. I stayed motionless, making it impossible to pull away. Mateo didn't seem to notice my inner turmoil. He remained by my side, his hand moving gently along my arm, as if this closeness were completely natural. His breathing was steady, his eyes closed again, and for a moment I wondered if he had fallen asleep. Then his hand moved, slowly sliding up my arm, sending a shiver through me. He opened his eyes, looking straight at me, and I froze. His gaze carried a question, as if he were asking if this was okay, if I felt the same strange pull he did. I whispered his name, my voice barely audible. I wanted to stop this, to create distance, but I couldn't seem to move. The tension in the air was palpable, like a storm quietly building, and neither of us spoke. The silence was heavy, with unspoken words, with feelings neither of us could put into words. Then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, he leaned closer. My heart pounded, my mind raced with conflicting thoughts, but I couldn't pull away. I felt torn, caught between my role as his mother and the unfamiliar emotions that had surfaced. As his face drew nearer to mine, my breath caught and every rational thought slipped away, leaving only that moment. Mateo's hand rested gently on my shoulder, his fingers pausing, as if he too was hesitating. The outside world seemed to fade, leaving only the warmth of his presence and the steady rhythm of his breath. I closed my eyes, trying to quiet the chaos in my mind. I told myself to step back, to end the closeness that felt overwhelming and confusing. But then his hand softly brushed a strand of hair from my face. It was such a small, tender gesture, yet it sent a deep ache through my chest, stirring feelings I couldn't explain. When I opened my eyes, his were fixed on mine, filled with a softness I had never seen before. His face was so close, I could see every detail, the faint freckles on his nose, the curve of his lips, the way his gaze searched for mine. There was vulnerability in his expression that mirrored my own, and I could see that he was just as lost in this moment as I was. We stayed there suspended in the stillness, as if time itself had stopped. My mind raced with questions, doubts, and confusion, but my body refused to move. I felt drawn to him, this person I had raised, but in that instant he felt like someone completely new to me. Just when I thought we would remain frozen in that strange, fragile connection forever, Mateo pulled back slightly, breaking the spell. He looked away, his cheeks flushed, and let out a shaky laugh as he rubbed the back of his neck. The sudden movement snapped me back to reality, and I realized how close we had been. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions swirling inside me. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said softly, his voice laced with uncertainty. "I didn't mean for things to get weird." He avoided my eyes, his words hesitant, as if he was struggling with the same confusion I felt. I wanted to comfort him, to assure him everything was fine, but the words stuck in my throat. For the first time in years, I felt uneasy around my own son. Finally, I reached out, placing my hand on his shoulder. I gave him a small, reassuring smile, hoping it would ease the tension between us. "It's okay, Mateo," I said. My voice was gentle yet steady, though my heart was still pounding. "It's just that, well, we've been alone for so long. We probably both feel a little lost." He nodded, a flicker of relief passing through his eyes. The tension in the room began to ease. The heavy weight between us lightened slightly until the doorbell rang. The sudden sound jolted us both, pulling us back to the present like a rush of wind. I quickly stood up, grateful for the interruption. My legs felt unsteady as I walked to the door, trying to compose myself and quiet the storm of emotions swirling within me. When I opened it, our neighbor Daniel was standing there, his easy, familiar smile lighting up his face. Daniel had always been friendly, the kind of neighbor who offered to shovel snow or lend a hand when something needed fixing. But tonight, there was something in the way his eyes lingered on me that felt different. "Hi, Sophia," he said warmly. "I thought I'd stop by to see if you needed anything with the colder weather. I can help if there's any problem with the heating or anything else." His words were casual, but his tone was kind, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me, grounding me for the first time in what felt like hours. "Thank you, Daniel," I replied with a smile, my voice steady now. "Actually, the house has been a little cold lately. I'd appreciate it." As Daniel stepped inside, I saw Mateo waiting in the hallway, his expression unreadable. He didn't say a word, but the way he watched us filled the air with a new kind of tension. I glanced at him, and for a second, I thought I saw something flicker in his eyes, something almost like jealousy, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. The thought unsettled me, leaving me to wonder if there was more behind his silence than I wanted to admit. Daniel moved around the house, checking the heater and chatting with me as he worked. We talked about the weather, the neighborhood, the usual things, but I couldn't shake the awareness of Mateo's presence. He stayed quiet nearby, his gaze fixed on us. His intensity added an edge to the room, like an unspoken question hanging in the air. After a few minutes, Daniel turned back to me with his usual warm smile. Everything looks fine, Sophia, but if anything comes up, don't hesitate to call. Thank you, Daniel, I said sincerely, walking him to the door. As I closed it behind him, the silence that filled the house felt heavier than before. When I turned, Mateo was still standing there, arms crossed and his expression serious. Are you okay, Mateo? I asked softly, trying to read what was going on in his mind. He shrugged, looking down at the floor. Yeah, I'm fine. I just didn't expect Daniel to stop by, that's all. I wanted to say more, to bridge the strange gap between us. But before I could, he brushed past me and walked to his room. The door closed softly behind him, leaving me with a strange mix of relief, confusion, and something much harder to name. A lingering sense of something unfinished. I stared at his door, my thoughts swirling. The ache in my chest was hard to define, a mixture of guilt, longing, and questions I didn't know how to answer. I turned and went to my own room. Sitting on the edge of the bed, the events of the night played over and over in my mind. The closeness Mateo and I had shared, the way his eyes lingered when Daniel was there, and the tension that seemed to grow with every passing moment. I couldn't ignore it forever, but I also didn't know how to face it. Just then, a soft knock on my door interrupted my thoughts. My heart skipped a beat as I wondered if it was Mateo. Come in, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The door opened, and there he was, standing in the doorway with an expression I couldn't read. He stepped inside silently, closing the door behind him, and sat beside me on the edge of the bed. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was thick, with all the things left unsaid. A weight we both seemed to feel but didn't know how to lift. Mom, he began at last, his voice low, almost a whisper. I don't know what's going on. I'm sorry if I made things weird earlier. His voice trailed off. His words faltered as he looked down at his hands, fidgeting nervously. I reached out, placing my hand over his, giving a gentle squeeze in the hope of easing the tension. Mateo, it's okay, I said softly. Maybe we're both just feeling a little lost right now. We've been alone for so long, and sometimes that can make things confusing. He nodded slowly, his gaze still fixed on his hands. Then he looked up at me, his eyes filled with emotions. I couldn't decipher sadness, confusion, and something else that felt almost vulnerable. He started, his voice trembling slightly, as if unsure whether to finish the thought. I didn't know what to say. My own heart ached with the same confusion, and for a moment I considered pulling him into an embrace, telling him everything would be okay, that we would work through it together. But I hesitated, unsure if that would help or only make things more complicated. So instead, I remained still, letting the silence speak for the both of us. Finally, I took a deep breath, pulling myself together, and looked him directly in the eyes. Mateo, I said softly, maybe we just need to take a step back. Give ourselves time to think about everything. It's okay to feel close, but it's also okay to need space to sort things out. My voice was calm, but inside I felt as though I were navigating uncharted waters, unsure if I was saying the right thing. He nodded again, more slowly this time, and then, to my surprise, rested his head on my shoulder. It was a gesture that felt as familiar as the days when he was younger and would come to me for comfort after a hard day. The weight of his head against me brought a rush of warmth and nostalgia, even though that unspoken tension still lingered beneath the surface. Without thinking, I wrapped my arm around him, holding him in a way that felt both protective and uncertain. It was a comforting gesture, one that reminded me of our bond, even if it now carried an edge I couldn't fully ignore. For the first time in a long while, I felt a small sense of peace. Maybe we didn't need to have all the answers right now. Maybe it was enough just to sit together, taking things one step at a time, no matter how complicated they seemed. As we sat in silence, holding on to each other, I allowed myself to believe for a moment that this closeness might somehow overcome the confusion between us. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. The warmth between us was comforting, yes, but also unsettling, like something lying just beneath the surface, waiting to come out. And even as we stayed there, as still and quiet as the room around us, I knew this wasn't the end of the story. There were things we both felt, things we couldn't yet name, and they wouldn't remain hidden forever. After a while, Mateo lifted his head and looked at me with a serious face. Mom, I don't know what to do with these feelings. I don't want things to be harder for us, but I also can't ignore them. His words hung in the air like a question he didn't dare to ask aloud. I swallowed. My mind raced as I searched for what to say, but just as I opened my mouth, there was another knock at the door. We both jumped, startled, looking at each other in surprise. The knock was firm, almost urgent, as if whoever was on the other side somehow knew something was happening. Feeling a sudden rush of nerves, I stood and opened the door. Daniel was there again, his face lined with concern. Sophia, I'm sorry to bother you. I just thought, well, I wanted to check if everything's all right. You seemed a little off earlier. I glanced at Mateo, who was watching us closely, his face unreadable. I tried to keep my voice steady as I replied, Thank you, Daniel, but we're fine, just having a quiet night. Daniel looked at me, then at Mateo, his expression thoughtful. All right, but remember, I'm right next door if you need anything. After he left, I closed the door and turned back to Mateo, who was still watching me with that same intensity. He stood and walked slowly toward me, and I felt my heartbeat quicken again. The air between us was heavy, with everything unspoken. But just as he reached me, he stopped. His expression shifted, as though he was fighting with himself. Maybe we shouldn't force this, Mom, he said quietly, his voice trembling. Maybe we need time. I nodded. My heart ached with the same conflicting feelings. You're right, Mateo. We both need to think about everything. Let's not rush this. He nodded too, and we stood there close but cautious, as if we were standing on the edge of something we couldn't control. It was an ending, but also a beginning, something we couldn't quite define. And as he walked away to his room, I wondered what the future might hold for us. If you'd like to hear the rest of our story, let us know in the comments below, and we'll share what happens next in part 2.